Perfect.
So I have the character sheet, and we have a little combat map
Okay. Okay.
location. And my agenda for today involves actually fighting.
Yeah. Nice. I was
Yeah.
kind of expecting that, but
But I also want to have this be not just me to you, and not just, you shouldn't be paying me just to teach me your game.
yeah, of
So
course.
I want you also to choose one of the questions that you have in mind.
Okay, I'm going
Let's do
want
that
to
first.
touch. Yeah, I think I'm going to eat a couple minutes of your time. It's not really a question, but it's something that I was left with the last session, which is you ended asking me, "Do you have a piece of artwork or something that can really inspire you?" And I went back to that because actually I wanted to narrow it down a bit because I have a ton. There is a lot of material, and so I was like, I need to find one image. And the result was a bit funny because I narrowed it down to one, actually a set of 3 images that aren't really perfect in describing what I'm trying to do, but they are very important for the inspiration.
That's
and
what
it's a set of drawings that actually don't pertain to a game I was part with, but it was a very big game when we were teens. And most of my friends that I play today played in that game. And they would send the description of the scenes to an artist who will then draw, pictures.
So this is original art.
Yes.
Okay.
But the really fun thing about this is that it's basically 3 scenes, and they are all of the same. That's what struck me as relevant. They are all the same scene. It's a group of people fighting a very specific monster. There's a scene where they are fighting a werewolf, and there's one guy missing one leg because the werewolf tore it off, and the other guy running, and there's a girl with 2 similar. It's fun. And then there is a scene with them fighting a vampire. So there is the bunch of people with the coffin open. They are about to strike him in the heart, and the actual vampire is behind them, because that's how the scene played. It was all a D&D second edition at the time, because it was over 20 years ago. And so it has nothing to do with the rules or how the game is played, but the inspiration of people fighting a monster. When I picked it up, I looked up the name of the artist, and something in my mind clicked. And so I went to my bed stool, and I don't know if you know this.
Oh yeah.
But I think you do. This is the Italian version, because I couldn't find any an English, and it's very pretty with the white booklet for the player and the black booklet for the monster or the antagonist. Let's say that. And the artist who made those drawings for us is Michela De Sacco.
Yeah.
Which is the same woman who did the art for this.
Well, I'm not surprised. Michela De Sacco and I have actually done some comics together.
Oh, nice, nice. And she was the girl. That art is from her.
Right. Well, I'm not surprised, because I respect her very much. And consider her to be a real professional.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's great. Okay.
Yes, it's very comic booky. It's very comic booky, but it's the feeling that matters. So that's
keep this in mind. I'm not sure why you keep saying, but it's not showing the rules, but it's not showing the rules. It's not showing.
No, it's
Lorenzo, listen, all I care about is the inspiration. That's what it's for. It's not for anything else. In fact, what do you want on the cover of your game? Something that shows a particular rule in action?
No.
Or something that provides the inspiration that lets people have the right attitude when they start reading the rules?
Yes,
that's what
I understand what you mean. I think it's what I was trying to go at is that the translation between that mood and feeling, the subject is correct. The art is more comic bookish than I would want, but the feeling, it's personal to me. That's why it's inspiration. I don't know if it will convey the right idea on the cover to people who approach this
right, but I'm not talking about the real color illustration. I'm talking about what you carry around in your notebook.
Yes, of course.
Personal little picture. I actually found by accident the one that I used for Circle of Hands, which I thought I had lost, but it turns out it was in some other folder on my hard drive, and I found it after all.
Oh,
So I'm going, since you've been reading Circle of Hands,
yeah,
I
yeah.
want you to wait just a moment while I call that up for you.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So what you are looking at here is it's actually some Warhammer wallpaper that
Okay.
somebody
Okay.
made some decades ago for, I
Yeah,
don't know.
I
But the
had this
point is
Elric
that
feeling, but
when
okay,
I
Warhammer
started
works.
when I started working on Circle of Hands again, I said I need something, and for some
Hmm.
reason I happened upon this picture on the internet, and I said that's the one that I need in mind. And I can tell you 100 things about it that are not right for Circle of Hands,
Yeah, of course,
but
of
it doesn't
course.
matter.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Great. Well, so I'm glad you have pictures in your mind, and I'm glad you can use them for this purpose. Now, what about a question or two that you
Okay,
have?
okay. So basically, it's something. Well, it's something that pertains to something I've heard you speak about. I think during the seminary thing with where you were going about the creating the designer portfolio. And I don't remember exactly the game you were referring to, but you were talking about, I think, I don't want to say it was Champions Now, because that's not how I remember the rules, but maybe I wouldn't trust myself on our remembering rules from that long time ago. The point was, you were describing how people could decide what consequences they will suffer from a wound, like having a limp leg or a broken arm or stuff like that. And that didn't affect them in the rules, aside from not letting them do something that would require, I mean, having to describe the effects of that. And I was wondering if, because that's something I would really like to, capture and put in a bottle, like lightning in a bottle. I mean, that kind of feeling. And I'm wondering, can something like that work in a tactical in a game with the tactical war game thingy like we have going on here on that map?
Well, first of all, this did apply to champions, and it applied to champions from long ago.
Yeah.
And to be clear, it was nothing in the rules. It was completely, there's nothing, the rules just had you count down your points, and when you came to 0 in tissue damage, then you were dead, and that was all.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
Or dying. But in the case of actual play, people would impose penalties, mechanical penalties. They would say, I can only go at half movement. They would just say it. And so the only reason people would do that, and I would point out that in Champions, tactical movement is actually quite important. Champions is built very much off of the old fantasy trip maps and combat options. And your half move plus attack, all of the rules that you know from 4th edition D&D are a modification of Champions.
Yeah.
So it's not.
It was X based, maybe.
It doesn't matter if it's hexes or squares.
Yeah, I was thinking of Fantasy Trip. Yeah,
people. Well, they Champions is hexes too, but really, that's the most trivial thing I can imagine.
Yeah, of course.
Forget any. It's a grid.
Yeah,
right. It's a grid. Just call it whatever. I don't care if it's triangles. It's still a grid.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you have a system and a play experience in which you have invested in your character as, I would say heroic, but that word is too loaded. Let's say a character, let's say heroic with a little h, right? Not a big theoretical h, but just a little. But you are invested in this character as heroic, and you feel as though they deserve it. All right?
Yeah.
So under those circumstances, it will seem to you that when they take a really hard hit, that you are disappointed if the character is untouched. You don't want your story to be about your untouched hero with a little number bar clicking down behind them.
Yeah.
That's not how you want to imagine this. That's not who this person is. If this character gets hit by something that's represented by a lot of points, or in the case of champions, is coming in on a particular type of damage that's designated non-temporary, that this damage will stay with you, then you will often want to enrich the fiction specifically about your character undergoing hardship. Your character is experiencing difficulties that would be a good excuse to stop.
Yeah. But it doesn't.
Not going to stop.
Yes.
And for that to make sense in a game like Champions, you're going to have to actually make it make sense in terms of numbers.
Yeah.
And so you're going to put those numbers in. You might as well just pretend there's a table in the game that says, take this much body damage in one hit, roll hit location. Oh, it's to your leg. Well, I guess you're at half movement. There is no such table in Champions, but you just made one up.
Yeah.
You just made up the perfect table.
That's what because now, I don't want to turn this into an explanation because it's a question.
But notice that if you said, well, I want to design so this will happen, you are not going to have a literal and simplistic you're not going to have a literal and simplistic method that just puts in the table.
Yeah.
Putting in the table is the opposite of what you want.
Yes, that's why if you see in the upper part of the character sheet of Tessa, there is a box which reads trauma. Mm-hmm. And the trauma has stages. And the current incarnation of how I was doing it is that when you get wounded or when you get in a really bad situation, because this can be psychological, you describe your trauma. You decide, okay, the player decides what happened to him. And during play, you can lean into your trauma, and so you can play it out. I mean, if you play a scene where you say, okay, I can't parry this because my arm is broken, or I can't do this because I'm limping, or stuff like that. Or maybe you can play out your paranoia, or you can play out your...
I get it, but what happens when you do that?
You basically, you load those points. You go to a stage where you have been penalized, and when you are loaded, when you are penalized, you can use that later. You get bonus die. You can get a bonus die.
Lorenzo, this is I will tell you something. Mm-hmm. This is exactly the wrong solution to what you're trying to encourage.
Okay, perfect.
You are trying to put in a reward, a little candy.
That's my word.
A little candy saying,
that's my word. If you
role play like this, you get a bonus die. That is not going to work. I am usually not so stern in consulting, right? I would say something like, oh, well, there are lots of ways to do it, Lorenzo. And some people have found, that this isn't as productive. No, I'm going all the way this time.
That's why I asked you.
Against your goal when you do that.
That's why I asked the question, because it wasn't, the reward wasn't born out of the idea of rewarding this. It was born out of one of the idea behind the game is that characters are kind of psychopath. I mean,
right. I get all that. But what I'm trying to say is that I don't care what you call it, you're putting in a bonus for acting in a way as a player that you want to be spontaneous.
Yes.
So forget it. It's contradictory. You're saying, I want people to, you want people to, wave to strangers on the sidewalk because we all get along and we are in a happy community together. So I guess I'll give everybody $1 if they wave to a stranger on the sidewalk. It's not going to work. It's not going to make the happy community by reverse engineering back to it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because in one of my tests, I wanted to see this happen. So I gave a character who's two-handed weapons, and I started with a trauma. He had a broken arm. Mm-hmm. It's because basically what happened that he played the scenes with, he was impaired by this thing, and then in final scene okay, fuck it, and he takes his weapon with both arms, and despite the pain, he gets over it. But I've never seen that happen spontaneously. Right. I mean, I had manufactured that situation.
And so therefore, and you got a manufactured experience. And so, what's the what?
It was fun in that situation, but it wasn't his, it was mine. So,
yeah, it's not the same thing. So,
yes, I was happy. Right. I'm not sure he was.
All I'm going to say is this. You're missing perhaps the starting point of my description of what happened in Champions.
Which is people did it spontaneously.
The person is invested in the heroism of their character. They are. They're not going to do that kind of thing spontaneously until they are. And there will never be a mechanic that provides that investment as a reward cycle.